Everyone, welcome back to another review with OT Rex. Today we're going to be covering trigger finger. So let's start off with what is trigger finger. Trigger finger is a condition of catching or a locking sensation in your finger when you bend or flex it. This is also known as stenosing tenosynovitis, which is such a mouthful to say, so trigger finger is so much easier to remember. So this most frequently is caused by overuse in your thumb and ring finger. The exact cause is actually unknown, but typically we associate it to that overuse or forceful hand activity. And people with diabetes and rheumatoid arthritis are also at higher risk for trigger finger. So before we dive into everything, let's have a little anatomy review for us to really understand what causes the trigger finger and the bending of that finger, either your ring finger, middle finger, or your thumb. So we have a flexor tendon that runs along the palmar side of our fingers, and that flexor tendon helps us flex our fingers. So what happens normally is that the flexor tendon will glide smoothly through a tunnel that we have along the palmar side of our finger called the tendon sheath. Along the tendon sheath, there are tissue bands called pulleys that help hold the flexor tendon in place close to our finger bone. But what happens is that A1 pulley is actually going to be impacted for trigger finger. So normally our A1 pulley is right along the opening of our tendon sheath. And what happens when we have trigger finger is that the A1 pulley gets inflamed and it thickens, which makes it harder for your flexor tendon to smoothly glide when you bend your finger, which is why you get a catching, locking, popping sensation when you try to bend your finger when you have trigger finger. I love this analogy that I learned from one of my hand therapy supervisors. So, if you think of your finger as a fishing pole, the bone is the fishing pole, and then your flexor tendon is the fishing string that runs through the loops of the pole. And those loops are the pulleys that help keep your flexor tendon close to your bone. So, if one of your fishing pole loops all of a sudden has a blockage or it's too tight, then your fishing string or your flexor tendon is not going to be able to glide smoothly when you are using your fishing pole. So your finger is the same way. When we have this overuse and all of a sudden our pulley is getting inflamed and thickens, it's going to be very hard for our flexor tendon to glide smoothly through it, which is why you're going to get that pain and that catching. The symptoms include tenderness and the nodule, which is going to be at the base of the affected finger. There's going to be pain when you flex your fingers, stiffness, finger locked inflection, like I said earlier, and a lot of people report that their pain is worse in the morning. So, what is the treatment? Rest. Rest is so important. If you can avoid overuse and just relax your hand, put on a splint and avoid using that thumb or that finger, it will recover so much faster. But a lot of the times we don't realize how much we use our hands until we can't use them. So we do work on splints to stabilize the thumb or the finger during the day or for a night splint. You can also do gentle stretches and tendon glides to help keep our range of motion up and decrease stiffness and pain. You can also get steroid injections as well as use acetaminophen and other medication to help with inflammation and pain. Worst comes to worst, you can also get surgery, and what the surgery will do is release or cut the A1 pulley to improve the tendon glide. Typically, this will be treated in outpatient hands therapy, and their hand therapist will provide tendon glides, exercises, pain management strategies. Maybe you're using some kind of cold modality, as well as splinting. And splinting can come in a lot of different forms, and I have found that there are a lot of splints that you can just purchase online. but I shared a few different examples. You can use one of these oval 8 splints to keep your finger in extension. But I think that the ones that have more support are nice, like this one, because it covers more of your finger and it wraps around the palm. If you have it in your thumb, then you would want something that extends your thumb and holds it in place, like this thumb spica splint. And here are two examples from a hand website, so you can see how a hand therapist would make a hand splint for someone who has trigger finger, which is pretty similar to some of these other splints that you see, and you get the idea of what kind of support the person will need. Alrighty, that concludes our review. Trigger finger is very easy to remember if you think about the term pull the trigger. So imagine a water gun being held and the trigger being pressed down, and your finger will be locked in flexion, which is what happens for people who have this condition. So I hope this was a helpful review, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.